It's interesting, these heroes you name. Drogo, Jorah, Dario, even this Jon Snow. They all fell in love with you.
Jon Snow's not in love with me.
Oh, my mistake. I suppose he stares at you longingly because he's hopeful for a successful military alliance.
Yes, I think you're right, both of you. Welcome to my very first semi-professional review video about the Season 7 storyline of Jon Snow, and hand in hand with that a little bit about Daenerys and Sansa as well, the triangle that was promised. Fair warning ahead of this, it's going to be pretty negative, I think, because this season has really been the worst season for me so far, and I think all the criticism it has received is really pretty justified. So fair warning ahead of this. If you're okay with that, then welcome. On to the big ugly dragon in the room, because Season 7 seemed to be mainly about the power struggle and union/alliance of Jon Snow, aka Aegon Targaryen, and Daenerys Targaryen. All in all, I'm not at all very happy with the direction of this, most of all because I feel like Benioff and Weiss stretched Jon out of character multiple times and had him act in strange ways in order to reach certain plot points and force this atrocious failure of a romance on him. Well, I think it's supposed to be a romance, and however, I can't really blame the characters themselves, I blame the writers. They did similar stuff with other characters like Littlefinger and Tyrion. Well, Littlefinger most of all, having them, act out of character occasionally, and it was pretty frustrating this season. On to Jon. He leaves Winterfell at the end of episode 2, leaving Sansa in charge of the North until he returns. Now, this didn't come as a surprise to me at all. I knew all the stupid Stark Bowl promotion by the showrunners and actors would not live up to its hype. Stark Bowl was really, pretty ridiculous. I never really at all believed that Sansa would betray Jon in any way. It was clear from the very beginning on that Littlefinger's attempts of manipulation didn't work anymore with her. And I was really very happy with the Jon-Sansa relationship at the start of the season. How he gave her the North, trusted her with it, because, let's face it, Sansa is the true heir to the North. Even after Bran's return, that didn't change, as he is now the three-eyed raven and not Brandon Stark anymore, and he knows this as well. So Sansa gives Jon good advice, like he needs to be smarter than Ned and Robb and not make the same mistakes.
You have to be smarter than father. You need to be smarter than Rob. I loved them, I missed them, but they made stupid mistakes and they both lost their heads for it.
And how should I be smarter? By listening to you.
That'd be so terrible.
And ultimately, Jon learned to listen to Sansa and asked for her thoughts, as we saw in the scene where they received Tyrion's letter from Dragonstone.
You know him better than any of us. What do you think?
So, I was really happy with how things progressed, and I was really curious to see how things would go on when they were apart. Jon leaves Dragonstone in order to try to form an alliance with Daenerys for her dragons and army to get Dragonglass for the fight against the White Walkers. The first meeting played out exactly how I thought it would, both of them very much in character, but from then on it really went downhill for me, sadly. Jon gets trapped at Dragonstone because he refuses to bend the knee. Still, Daenerys ends up allowing him to mine Dragonglass. However, instead of doing this, he walks around with Davos while Missandei tries to tell him what a savior Queen Daenerys is, because it's supposed to impress Jon. They try to show Daenerys in the most glorious light, completely ignoring all the cruel things she has done in the past in Essos. I had always been wondering how Jon is supposed to even get along with her, simply for the fact that both their characters are different, like day and night, really. The only thing they have in common is that they both want to help people. She's the entitled queen who talks about herself in the third person with fire-breathing weapons of mass destruction. He's the most modest, humble guy with no ego, who never asked for power and who just wants to do what's right. And yes, Daenerys might have her good goals, but she has also done things in the past that were good, but she has also done lots of terrible things. And basically the people that she frees, she makes them her own slaves, pretty much. Yeah, she's pretty much in constant conflict between wanting to be a good-hearted queen who frees slaves and does good things, and her Targaryen character with signs of the infamous Targaryen madness. And I was wondering how the show would try to tell me that Jon would actually fall for someone like her. And now after season 7 is over, I still don't have an answer really. But first, back to Jon himself. In episode 5 he receives a raven from Winterfell and he learns that not only are the White Walkers marching towards Eastwatch, he also learns that Bran and Arya are alive and at Winterfell. His reaction:
I thought Arya was dead. I thought Bran was dead.
I'm happy for you.
Yeah, pretty much no reaction and so out of character. Usually he should have left for Winterfell immediately, but he only wants to leave Dragonstone now because of a stupid as fuck plan from Tyrion to capture a white north of the Wall to convince Cersei of all people that the threat is real. By the way, why not just take some random prisoner, kill him and have him turn into a white at the Wall? Mission accomplished. Anyway, yeah, the White Walkers are a priority and Jon feels like he needs to do anything to keep the North and Westeros safe, even though they seem to have been marching forever and only now become a problem. But usually Jon should have left straight for Winterfell as soon as he learned that Bran and Arya are alive. Arya above all because, we all knew that they were always close in the past, and I think the answer lies with the writers, as so often. They needed to keep Jon away from Winterfell all season, so Bran couldn't tell him about his parents. And at some point this really became rather ridiculous. The contrived storytelling required Jon to stay away from Winterfell because the writers wanted him to deepen his relationship with Daenerys. They wanted to reach a certain plot point. We now know it was the boat scene, so they wrote stuff to get there, no matter if it was logical for a character or not. And the same can be said about the Winterfell plot, really. The showrunners basically admitted in the Inside the Episode video that they wrote the entire plot backwards. This resulted in characters acting illogically and basically out of character. I also think the same can be said about the zombie dragon Viserion. Yeah, they probably had that scene in mind and worked backwards to get it, coming up with a stupid-as-shit plan just to have a dragon killed and maybe give Daenerys a little redemption. And now it's basically the character's own fault that the Night King got a dragon and managed to breach the wall. And it's really so fucking stupid. And another issue that really bothered me was that Jon never once sent a letter to Winterfell informing Sansa about what was going on, what he was up to, and most of all that he hadn't been roasted alive as she had feared. She's ruling the North and he never once gets in touch with her. He only starts sending ravens in the finale episode. And Sansa even points out that she hasn't heard from Jon in weeks. Yeah, and don't tell me that Daenerys didn't allow him to send a raven back north. This whole prisoner in rebellion bullshit is already way too ridiculous and stupid. And why didn't he send the raven he got from Bran back to Winterfell? There was no communication until he informed Sansa that he had bent the knee to Daenerys. And this irritates me a great deal, really. And speaking of which, his entire motivation is still a mystery to me. We know he never asked to be king, but he accepted it because the Northerners believed in him and believed in him to protect the North. And after not bending the knee for several episodes, he suddenly decides to do it after all. And he does this after Daenerys said she would help him fight the Night King and his army. Why? For what reasons? What's different now all of a sudden? Was it just her willingness to risk her life and the lives of her dragons to save him and his men on this stupid mission, which cost her a dragon and which, by the way, was also partly to convince her of the White Walker threat? Does that suddenly make her the right and worthy Queen of Westeros? We don't know because the characters never voice what they think. I like to think that his motive is the same as it has always been. He thinks it's what's best for the North and Westeros to keep everyone safe. Yeah, but again, she had already assured him that she would help him fight the Night King, and by bending the knee now, he gives up the North and its independence, and in his note to Sansa, he only now refers to himself as one of the North. And basically, he gives up everything he and Sansa had been fighting for so hard in Season 6. For what exactly? And I'm still asking, why? You might think it won't matter anyway, that when the White Walkers breach the wall they all have to fight together anyway, and it doesn't matter who's ruling or not ruling the North, but to me it really matters a great deal. I don't want to call it betraying the North. I think Jon really does everything to keep it safe, but his motives are really still in the dark. Then he never once consulted Sansa before he made his decision, and she's after all currently ruling. It's just very, very irritating. I've also been thinking a lot about Robb, and if this makes Jon stupid like Robb by having him make similar mistakes. Yeah, Robb basically lost the North after being naive and marrying for love and breaking the deal with Walder Frey. However, I think in the end you can't really compare Jon's and Robb's situation. Robb lost the North because he was pretty naive and in love, and Talisa was pretty much a nobody. She didn't really bring anything to the table. But on the other side, Jon gave the North away willingly, knowing about the threat of the White Walkers and how important it is to have a powerful ally who would help him defeat them. However, as I pointed out before, Daenerys didn't ask Jon to bend the knee again. She had already promised she would help him, and he had a choice, and he chose to give the North away, and that is really, really so annoying and frustrating, and I still don't get it. And also to think that it was Jon's pride that had kept him from bending the knee is utterly ridiculous. The show wants to tell me that Jon bent the knee because he learned from Mance Rayder and his fate. And Tormund asked Jon how many people died for his pride. Exactly 0. Mance Rayder didn't refuse to bend the knee to Stannis because of his pride.
You told me you weren't here to conquer. You told me your people had bled enough.
That's right. I don't want them bleeding for Stannis Baratheon either.
You spent your life convincing 90 clans to come together for the first time in history. Thens and Hornfoots, the Ice River clans, even the Giants. A life's work uniting them. You didn't do it for power. You didn't do it for glory. You brought them together to save them because none of them has survived the winter, not if they're north of the wall. Isn't their survival more important than your pride?
Pride? Fuck my pride. This isn't about that. But if you can't understand why I won't enlist my people in a foreigner's war, there's no point explaining.
He didn't want his people to die in someone else's war, and as a consequence of not bending the knee, only Mance died, none of his people. If he had bent the knee, then his people would have fought and died for Stannis. And just like Mance, Jon is a reluctant leader, but people believed in them to lead them and keep them safe and alive. And suggesting that it's pride, especially coming from someone like Daenerys, is completely and utterly ridiculous. We know Jon is probably the least proud person in Westeros, and in the end, why exactly Jon bent the knee is still a mystery to me, and it's so frustrating. Yeah, maybe the reason lies in something the show and the writers seem to insist on, Jon and Daenerys falling for each other, which is also something the show and writers fail to convey in any believable manner. After their very first bumpy meeting, Daenerys allows Jon to mind Dragonglass after all. Does that make him think she has a good heart? Because out of the blue, Davos makes some random comment about how Jon illegally was staring at her good heart.
What do you think of her?
Who?
I believe you know of whom I speak.
I think she has a good heart.
A good heart? I've noticed you staring at a good heart.
Yeah, okay. When exactly did that happen? From then on, it's constantly other characters pointing out longing looks or even love.
They all fell in love with you.
Jon Snow's not in love with me.
Oh, my mistake. I suppose he stares at you longingly because he's hopeful for a successful military alliance.
What the fuck? By the way, I'm still wondering when exactly did Jon look longingly at anything other than the horizon? If you believe people who claim they saw it, then this, and maybe this is supposed to be Jon's intense longing look. Yeah, just for the record, he didn't even look back at her when he left Dragonstone. Only Jorah did, and the only one who ever looked remotely longing was Daenerys. But besides other characters having to point out to the audience that Jon and Daenerys are really, really attracted to each other, Benioff and Weiss also seem to feel the need to point it out in interviews, because apparently it's not obvious on the screen. Maybe it would have helped if they had actually written some dialogue scenes with Jon and Daenerys where they're actually talking so they can actually get to know each other. But instead we had a handful of minor scenes with no in-depth conversations. What do they know about each other? Nothing really. Well, at least Jon knows a little bit because Daenerys told him a little bit about how she had suffered all her life, about her family, the dragons, or how she can't have children. Some personal information. And what has Jon told her about himself? Nothing. For some reason he constantly withholds personal information about himself, and he never opened himself up to her at any point. And when she finally saw his stab wounds in episode 6, an opportunity to have an in-depth talk about the long-avoided topic of his resurrection, nothing again. Yeah, instead, cringy, cheesy dialogue, Jon calling her Dany out of the blue to please the fans and shippers, and more blank staring. I think one major problem besides the bad writing might be the fact that Kit Harington and Emilia Clarke are best friends in real life who are now being forced to play forced romance, which is also pretty awkward. And that's what it feels like, really. Completely rushed and forced and unnatural. Yeah, some fans argue that this has been foreshadowed for 20 years in the books. However, how can a relationship be foreshadowed when the characters have only just met each other? It's so unnatural and contrived. They basically know nothing about each other, and whenever they are around each other, they act like they can't really be themselves. It's like they constantly got some stick up the butt. They're so freaking boring together on top of it all. And the entire union feels like a set decision because they are the beautiful main protagonists and heroes who need to work together to defeat the evil monsters. And not like a natural romance. But being the same age and being beautiful and wanting to help people is not enough to call it love. The lack of romantic chemistry between the actors, which was noticed by many critics and viewers, doesn't help either, really. There's no sexual tension and mutual attraction. Well, at least she seems way more into him than he seems into her. Though I still really don't understand why, because she pretty much doesn't know anything about him. All they ever talked about was her dragons, politics, and the army of the dead. He even said to her in the scene at the painted table,
I put my trust in you, a stranger, because I knew it was the best chance for my people, for all our people. Now I'm asking you to trust in a stranger.
So he basically still considers himself a stranger to her. And seriously, Daenerys shows 100 times more emotions and love towards Jorah when he's around. And Jon doesn't even seem like himself when he's around her, like he's constantly thinking about what to say and to do. The low point of this plot by far is the boat scene, which, even if you did know about the leaks, came beyond out of the blue. In one scene they decide to sail north together, in the next scene, knock knock, more staring, and the next scene it's already full on action. No romance, no first kiss, no emotions, just rushing in and getting it over with. Just as stiff and chilly as the so-called romance. I mean, even Grey Worm and Missandei had more screen time, and they actually had some touching, meaningful, romantic dialogue. And I think it says a lot when basically all the internet memes about Jon and Daenerys are just about fucking. It's basically all this seems to be about, really. No romantic foundation whatsoever. And it's yet another thing that is so out of character for Jon, who voiced his doubts when she told him that he can't have children just a few scenes before this one.
I can't have children.
Who told you that?
The witch who murdered my husband.
Has it occurred to you she might not have been a reliable source of information?
If he doubts the words of the witch, who by the way on the show never said that Daenerys can't have children, then that means he assumes he might get her pregnant. When in season 1 he said he never wanted to father a bastard because obviously he knows what comes along with this status. So why do this when he never even voiced any intention to marry her and openly said that maybe the witch wasn't telling the truth? Does he doubt that they survive? In his letter to Sansa, he wrote if they survive the war, he pledges their forces to Daenerys. Yeah, it's all in the dark really and never gets explained. And seriously, this whole baby talk is better some massive red herring, because I would really vomit forever. The whole plot really feels so ridiculously manufactured and contrived and like nothing but pure fan service. George R. R. Martin said the meeting and convergence of Jon and Daenerys was sort of the point of the series, but he said nowhere that it's a romance that could even result in a baby to continue the bloodline of the Targaryens. And frankly, I think he might be trolling here, because you really think he would give away the ending of his book series already, or that he would, somehow say what's the point of the whole series? I mean, after all, his last book, A Dream of Spring, was originally titled A Time for Wolves. So see where this is really heading? Game of Thrones is not about beautiful heroes falling in love and defeating the evil monsters. It's not a damn fairy tale, and if it's supposed to be the point of the series, then why establish all these other characters with their moving and touching storylines? Especially and above all the Starks. We started the story with them, we have suffered with the Starks throughout the entire story, the injustice towards the family, we followed them closely, how Stark was even believed to be dead. The Starks really are the heart and soul of the story, and Jon is a massive part of the Starks, and he will always be one in his heart, which is really one of the reasons why we love him so much. So if the point of the story, or even the endgame, is a Targaryen union and restoration, the restoration of a race that is known for fire and blood, for weapons of mass destruction, for conquering and oppression, yeah, then good night and count me out. I even go so far and say Daenerys could be 100 times more interesting if they just made her go down the villain road once and for all. Don't get me wrong, it's not meant as bashing. George R. R. Martin likes to quote that a villain is a hero of the other side, and nobody is a villain in their own story. And over in Essos, Daenerys might have been a hero to some, but to Westeros she's an antagonist with 3 nuclear weapons that she is more than willing to use. And maybe this is the last twist that George R. R. Martin mentioned to Benioff and Weiss. He told them there would be one more big twist before the end, and it would be quite epic if all this time he was showing us the story of a hero, someone we used to sympathize with, gradually breaking bad and turning into a villain. After all, the show managed to achieve the opposite with Jaime, a bad, unlikable asshole in the beginning, who we are now rooting for and who redeemed himself. And this twist might go hand in hand with theories going around that there's actually a good reason why Jon is acting so strangely, and why there are no real romance vibes from his side really, and why he never opened up to her, never told her anything about himself. I seriously have major problems buying this romance, and now I can blame the writing, and as much as it hurts the acting, but maybe there are other reasons, which have to do with my Season 8 and Endgame thoughts, and my belief that Dan and Dave might be trolling us at the moment. But I think that's a topic for another video. But at this point I would just like to point out a quote from an interview from Kit Harington, where he was asked what's different about Jon Snow this season. And he answered that Jon is probably one of the more stable characters all the way through. You return to him each year and he doesn't change a great deal. But this year he does change. He becomes a politician. Having gone to the brink and seen things that other people haven't seen, he starts manipulating people in a very Jon Snow way, in a very kind way. Yeah, I will leave this here lingering in the air and maybe get back to that in another video. But anyway, of course I have to give a few thoughts already about Season 8 and what I think is going to happen and the potential endgame. Yeah, it starts with the boat scene and the decision to make it so, unromantic and stiff, and to present it with a crosscut of Bran revealing Jon's true parentage and the fact that he's the heir to the Iron Throne. Although, if we are really honest, neither Jon nor Daenerys is the rightful heir to the throne at the moment, because the Targaryens lost the throne when Robert conquered it. If they want the throne back, they have to conquer it. Anyway, I like to think that there's more behind the decision to show the parentage reveal in this manner, and I think the boat scene was more about symbolism and foreshadowing than anything else. Dan and Dave said in the Inside the Episode video that finding out about Jon's true lineage will cause problems and a rift between them, and I think that's ultimately what the crosscut was supposed to achieve. Showing two characters seemingly getting together while telling the audience that they're related and that Jon is the one with a bigger claim to the throne. And this was supposed to leave the audience with an uncomfortable and uneasy feeling. Unless you are a shipper, of course. This is not a romantic love story, really. They are pretty much doomed, just like Rhaegar and Lyanna. And also, as someone noticed, the way the scene was filmed seemed to foreshadow a shift of power. Because first Jon is bottom, and his knee is literally and symbolically bent, and the position changes with Jon on top when Bran says he's never been a bastard, he's the heir to the Iron Throne. And I really don't think anything is coincidence here. It wasn't romantic and it wasn't supposed to be, really. Not to mention that Jon should be pretty shocked when he finds out that Daenerys is his aunt. By the way, I really still can't get over how stupid it is that Jon's Targaryen name is Aegon. Because we know Rhaegar already had a son named Aegon with Elia Martell, and he was obsessed with the prince that was promised prophecy and thought his son Aegon was a prince. As we know, first Rhaegar was killed by Robert Baratheon, and after that his children Aegon and Rhaenys were killed by the Mountain towards the end of Robert's rebellion. Before Lyanna gave birth to Jon, did she learn about the death of Rhaegar's children and decide to name him Aegon because she knew Rhaegar was obsessed with prophecy? Or did they decide this together? I guess it's always good to have a spare Aegon just in case. So were the three heads of the dragon supposed to be Rhaenys, Aegon and Aegon? Anyway, the writers not only decided to have Rhaegar annul his marriage with Elia and therefore shame her and their children, but also to completely romanticize his relationship with Lyanna, which caused an entire war, whether she was abducted or not. It's clear that the showrunners want to hammer down the fact that Jon is the child of true love, of ice and fire, and not a bastard, but the true Targaryen heir. And they're paving his way to becoming a king of Westeros this way, I think. And they're doing this because in Season 8 we will most likely see some major conflict and drama, and not some boring we will rule together bullshit nonsense. Targ Bowl is coming, and like many other historical events, the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen civil war for succession, might get a repeat. Now we know, of course, that Jon doesn't care about any throne. He doesn't even seem to like the idea of living in a huge city. I really loved that scene at the beginning of the Season 7 finale that showed how much of a country boy he really is, and he couldn't understand how people could live in a huge city like King's Landing. But just like he doesn't care about the throne, he doesn't care about any other leadership positions. He didn't want to become Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, he didn't ask to become King in the North, but people pushed him into these positions because they believed in him. And I think the same will happen when everyone learns about his bloodline. What really matters is that he's a Targaryen ruler by name and claim, but he's 100% Stark at heart. He was not raised by the Targaryens. Rhaegar didn't raise him, he's only his biological father. Jon doesn't identify himself with any other house but House Stark. Ned Stark raised him with all his values and principles, and I'm happy that the show, especially in the finale, made it very clear that Jon is still so much like Ned and that he admires him a lot. I think Jon's Targaryen bloodline only matters because it makes him a rightful heir to the throne. He can be a Targaryen ruler with all the good Stark values and principles. I also think that Daenerys will not take these news lightly at all. Basically, it makes her lose her entire purpose of the past 7 seasons. She might become even more paranoid than in Season 7, and I think she will get betrayed in the end. Learning that someone else has a bigger claim to the throne should give her a huge blow. I'm very certain Tyrion as well as Varys will switch sides and side with Jon when the truth is out, and they will push him for the throne. Tyrion already gave me huge betrayal vibes throughout season 7. Well, basically he's got the toughest job at the moment, constantly having to keep Daenerys under control and talking sense into her. And Varys gave me those vibes as well, when he hinted that the Daenerys' way of conquering and handling things is quite questionable, and how it gave him flashbacks of the Mad King.
She gave Tarly a choice. A man who had taken up arms against her. What else could she do?
Not burn him alive alongside his son?
I am her hand, not her head. I can't make her decisions for her.
That's what I used to tell myself about her father. I found the traitors, but I wasn't the one burning them alive. I was only a purveyor of information. It's what I told myself when I watched them beg for mercy. I'm not the one doing it. And the pitch of their screams rose higher. I'm not the one doing it. When their hair caught fire and the smell of the burning flesh filled the throne room, I'm not the one doing it.
Daenerys is not her father.
And she never will be. With the right counsel. You need to find a way to make her listen.
I think his betrayal was foreshadowed first at the beginning of the season, when Daenerys threatened to burn him alive if he ever betrayed her. But there are other moments as well which to me foreshadowed Targaryen trouble in season 8. Like this infamous line which seems to lead to anything but good fortune.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come, Your Grace.
Yeah, foreshadowing Daenerys' downfall in season 8? Also, there was this line from Jon in episode 6.
I'd bend the knee, but
What about those who swore allegiance to you?
they'll all come to see you for what you are.
Jon really hasn't seen all sides of Daenerys yet. He hasn't seen that she rather burns people alive than taking them as war prisoners, and that she seems to enjoy doing this. He has mostly seen her, positive traits and her tame behavior. But in season 8, he, as well as the Northern Lords and the other Westerosi, might see her for what she really is. A mentally unstable queen with good goals, but controversial, questionable, and frankly dangerous decisions. Above all, no matter what, she will always suffer from the reputation of being the Mad King's daughter. I'm not saying that she will go full Mad Queen, even though that would make her character so much more interesting, really. But there might be major trouble on the horizon. I also keep remembering this scene from season 5, where Varys talks about the kind of leader Westeros needs.
If you sat on the Iron Throne, would you spread misery throughout the land?
I will never sit on the Iron Throne.
No, you won't. But you could help another climb those steps and take that seat. The Seven Kingdoms need someone stronger than Tommen, but gentler than Stannis. A monarch who can intimidate the High Lords and inspire the people. A ruler loved by millions with a powerful army and the right family name.
Back then, I was already thinking, that sounds exactly like Jon if he wasn't a bastard. And now guess what? He's not the rightful Targaryen and the one with the first claim to the throne. Yeah, Varys and Tyrion have seen by now the true nature of Daenerys, that she's in Westeros, and on top of this, it was shown again and again throughout the series that Daenerys is basically a conqueror, not a ruler. Yeah, she wasn't a good ruler in Meereen, really. In fact, she caused lots of chaos, and Dario even told her that she's a conqueror, and that she's not meant to sit on a chair for the rest of her life. And I think we can assume that this will not be the case. It's my very firm belief that Daenerys will never sit on the Iron Throne, It's not her path and destiny, not just because it would be predictable and boring as hell. I think she will either sacrifice herself in the Great War or, another theory that's going around, die giving birth if she really becomes pregnant. Adding to this, her line to Tyrion about how they will discuss the succession after she wears the crown sounded to me like she will most certainly never wear the crown. I don't really see any scenario where she sees the end of the story alive, let alone sits on the Iron Throne and rules. This might be the bittersweet ending that George R. R. Martin promised, or at least one bitter part. However, I'm a little afraid they might take her redemption too far, that she somehow willingly chooses to step back and that she realizes that the throne doesn't matter. Yeah, that would be really, really lame. Yeah, but let's not forget the vision in the House of the Undying, where she almost touches the throne and then turns back from it and goes north of the wall and reunites with Drogo and her child. Yeah, many people think that foreshadows her death beyond the wall, maybe in the Great War. Yeah, we will see. I also think it would be very, very unsatisfying if Jon ends up being the hero who dies sacrificing himself in the Great War, or if he simply rejects the throne. Why would they make such a fuss about his parentage and his lineage, and the fact that he's the secret heir to the throne, the biggest secret so far in Game of Thrones, if he never ends up ruling, or if it doesn't change anything between him and Daenerys at the moment? I'm a little conflicted here because I've always really loved Bastard Jon, you know, the normal guy who's nobody important really to anyone, who just wants peace and do the right thing. And if they suddenly call him Aegon Targaryen, that would be super annoying. He achieved everything as Jon Snow, and I think he will always be Jon. To his family, everyone around him, but also to himself. And I really can't imagine that he would ever leave the North and live somewhere else, least of all in King's Landing. He emphasized his love for the North so much at the beginning of the season, it will always be his home. And I don't know, maybe they can relocate the capital or something? Or at least the throne. Yeah, at the same time, throughout season 7, they showed what a great ruler Sansa really is, and I'm really happy about that. While Cersei and Daenerys use fear and intimidation as they're stroking their fire weapons to achieve their goals, Sansa provides for the people, worries about essential stuff like having enough food, preparing everyone for winter and the Great War to come. Sansa is slowly and quietly getting built up as queen. As true-born daughter of Ned and Catelyn Stark, and with Bran now being the three-eyed raven, she's the heir to the north, while Jon is the heir to the south. They could unite the Seven Kingdoms again and bring peace and stability to the realm, much like Elizabeth of York and Henry Tudor after the War of the Roses, which we know Game of Thrones is based on. Is it a coincidence that Henry's coat of arms showed a dragon and a greyhound? If there's one positive thing I see about the Jon-Daenerys affair, it's that people seem to have gotten more accepting and tolerant towards the idea of Jon and Sansa happening, and happening as king and queen. It might even make Jon himself more accepting of this, and seriously, every Jon and Sansa scene so far had way more romantic vibes and subtext than any Jon and Daenerys scene, and it might explain why Jon was acting so strangely throughout season 7, why he never opened up to Daenerys, why he kept anything personal about himself pretty much a secret. If he's illegally so epically in love, why does he act like this with her? And yeah, I really think that Jon and Sansa have quietly and subtly been set up as ruling couple. And yeah, after all, Daenerys still has betrayal for love to face. Yeah, maybe it's Jon, who knows. And now we know that cousin marriage is perfectly normal and common in Westeros, really, just like back during the Middle Ages. And we know that even the Starks have a history of marrying within their own family tree, Ned Stark's parents being cousins, for example. And in his original storyline, George R. R. Martin had Jon and Arya fall in love after she escaped to the Wall, and they were tormented by their feelings until they find out that they're actually cousins. So, judging by this, he seems to have created Jon as someone who could fall for his sister. He is half Targaryen after all, maybe it's in the DNA. And Jon and Sansa were never close really when they were younger. In fact, they were worlds apart and they only just now got to know each other really. Not to mention the countless parallels that show them as reincarnation of Ned and Catelyn Stark. It would really be the perfect endgame, but this, with all the potential hints throughout the books and the show, also in season 7, is a topic for another video. Thank you very much for watching. Yeah, I hope I will have another video up very soon. Yeah, if you like, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and see you in the next video. Bye!